Welcome back. All right, now to the balancing act of getting the economy moving without sinking it by moving it too quickly. Let's bring in Chad Livengood with Crane's Detroit Business. You see him there at the bottom of the screen. Dennis Archer Jr. on the upper left with Ignition Media, and Sandy Barua, the head of the Detroit Regional Chamber, on the upper right. Sandy, let me start with you. You at the Chamber commissioned a poll this past week that kind of gave us a look of just how bad this has been in Michigan, and it is taking more than its pound of flesh.
Yeah, it is. It is depression level data. When we look at where we were during the Great Depression, Michigan reached an unemployment rate of 32%. The Chamber estimates, based on the polling that we did, that when the month of April closes, we'll have an unemployment rate of 27%. That's really unprecedented and far beyond anything we had during the Great Recession of over a decade ago.
And of all of the steps and measures that you're watching us take, both at the federal and local level, can we address that?
So the era of small government is certainly over, Devin. I mean, the amount of money, the speed in which the federal government is reacting far outstrips anything that I saw when I was working for President Bush. I mean, certainly during the 2008 crisis, we undershot the crisis. And even as much as we're doing now with over $3 trillion passed just in the last month to support small businesses and individuals, we're still undershooting the crisis. There is really almost no way for the federal government, I'm sorry to say, to kind of make people and make businesses whole when you consider the scope of this crisis and the duration of this crisis, because what has been passed so far just gets us to where we are now.
Dennis, you've got a number of businesses, some that include working with the automakers right now and trying to put together medical gear, but you also own a restaurant, of course, which has been dinged very badly. Give me a thumbnail on what it looks like from your vantage point right now.
Hopeful, definitely hopeful. I think if you take those different buckets from a hospitality standpoint, I think that we will be kind of the last bastion of business to be allowed to get back open. I don't disagree with that approach. I do not want to rush to open up as we see happening now in other states. I think a cautious, slow approach is phased-in approach works best. I know all of our folks are anxious to get back to work, but the problem, Devin, that I'm seeing now is that you have a number of restaurants, a couple of whom have done very well or seemingly very well, that have said they're not going to reopen. So where does that leave those employees who are working with those restaurants in terms of where to go next? We definitely want to get those people off of the rolls. And as it relates to our other enterprises, we're predominantly in the marketing space. And so both Chad and Sandy know that, you know, those are the first expenses to go when companies are looking to cut costs. They look at the marketing related costs.
No doubt about it.
A little bit of that, but we're confident.
Chad, the historian John Meacham this past week coined it the partisan pandemic. It didn't take long for politics to rear up. And give me a thumbnail of what you're seeing right now in Lansing as this is growing to be an increasingly political fight.
Well, the legislature has tried to basically re-exert itself into the process here. They've watched the governor take extraordinary measures to use these emergency powers and take over, you know, vast swaths of the economy and make all kinds of dictates, kind of in many ways reversing years of policy from the legislature. The one first example was the governor extended unemployment benefits from 20 to 26 weeks, and that was something that the legislature had cut under the previous administration. And so a lot of things that the legislature didn't want to do, from a policy standpoint, has not wanted to. The governor has just done by fiat in this state of emergency, and so there's a natural pushback from the Republican legislature against this Democratic governor. But now this extension of the stay-at-home order, this is using a different law. It's from 1945, passed at the end of World War II, that gives the governor different authority. And so the legislature now is basically trying to turn to, they're going to start investigating the governor. They formed a select committee of House and Senate members, and they are going to launch formal inquiries into how this whole response went into effect. And if you're interested in checks and balances in our government, this is actually probably a good thing, that we'll get some unanswered questions answered, potentially get some documents, get to see the sort of the paper trail of how the state government took extraordinary measures to protect public safety, but also, really impact the livelihoods of people.
This is a really difficult thing to try to measure because you can't possibly measure what would have happened had she made other decisions. Sandy, I'm curious, as we saw, of course, the protests that happened in Lansing. The whole country got to watch what was going on in Michigan that week. But I think it's been surprising to find that, at least in the polls of the past week, governor's moves have proven pretty popular among most Michiganders.
In our poll, she had a 57% approval rating. Fox News actually has her at 63%.
Yeah.
So she's doing quite well.
Then has it been too much from your perspective? There were a lot of people that just felt like a little bit of common sense, at least the way my email reads, that some things would be more common sense, things like letting guys cut the grass and so on.
Certainly, I think there's some legitimate debates about how far she's gone and some things that just don't make sense. I mean, the grass debate, both buying pot and buying planting seeds, that whole dichotomy
Yeah.
is a really good debate to have. But I think that also AP has a poll out. It's a national poll that shows that only 11% of Americans feel that their state has gone too far. So I think there is a kind of a flight to safety, if you will, across the country, that Americans are truly scared. And if we're going to open up the economy, which we obviously need to do in a methodical and smart way, employees and customers are both going to have to feel comfortable going back into the marketplace. Otherwise, all this opening is for naught.
Well, Dennis, I'm curious, is your worry more that we don't get back to business soon or that we go back too soon?
My worry is that we go back too soon. And Sandy brings up a good point, because if you talk about what we need in order to get for a full recovery, to get back to normal, everyone's talking about testing. They're talking about the ability to do contact tracing, surveillance, and obviously treatment. But consumer confidence is a huge part in this as well. And if you look at all the polls, to Sandy's point, I think the general public is appreciative of what's been in place so far. And then as business people, it's incumbent upon us, whether we are in retail, a movie theater, or a restaurant, to make our customers feel comfortable to come back in our doors.
Chad, lastly, your thoughts then on the starting things up again versus starting too quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we've tracked consumer confidence in this country in polling for decades, and I think that the definition of that has always been about your finances. Do you have the money in your pocket to go buy the new refrigerator, or just to make some purchase of dinner out that night? Now it's really also the consumer confidence of going to the restaurant and feeling safe, and so that's a whole new dynamic that businesses are going to have to adjust to in order to bring back their work.
Yeah, so right. Gentlemen, thanks so much for the time. Really good to have you with us here today, and stay safe, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, Devin.
All right, you bet. When we come back, we'll talk about the virus and the border. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.